What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we are going to be doing a 2-round mock draft without trades. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Below my face is my board. It's based off of my all 22 grades, so yes, completely transparent, but also something that's going to be a little bit irritating to a lot of people. It is what it is. I owe you transparency, and then these mock drafts allow it to be mixed in with actually what the consensus is. Below that are all the great ways to get involved with the community with that beautiful ticker. Just go to the link tree or 2 clicks going away from anything and everything. Still not using the headlight because still under concussion protocol. Was in a pretty bad accident a couple weeks ago. Let's get into this though. Starting out with the number 1 overall pick, we got the Carolina Panthers who just traded Diontae Johnson to the Baltimore Ravens. So I think we're going to be going after Travis Hunter here. People assume that he is the best player in the class, and this is a perfect role for him to fill. Diontae Johnson was a pretty large role in the Panthers, and I assume because they kind of were just saying we're calling it quits, they're basically being able to salvage the talent that they have to be able to get solid draft capital. So we're going to go Travis Hunter here, the first overall pick. People want to say he's a corner, and I think he might even be a better corner than wide receiver. However, look at where the money goes, and wide receiver 24, or maybe think wide receiver 23 and corner 4 make the same amount of money. So I don't blame Travis Hunter either. Pick number 2, we got the Tennessee Titans on the board. Wide receiver certainly could be the move here, but I just doubt that wide receiver back-to-back picks is going to be, the thing in the first round here. I do think that it is a little bit of a hot take. I think the top 3 receivers from last year, or at least the top 2, and Neighbors as well as Harrison were better than Travis Hunter. So, I do think that, to be fair, those guys should have been top picks as well. We just had 3 unbelievable quarterbacks that went ahead of them. But at number 2, though, for the Titans, people say you need to go after quarterback. And you know what? I'm not going to disagree that quarterback is a big issue. However, you don't fix an issue by putting a player in there that will not solve the issue for the long haul. For me, I just do not have a first-round grade on these quarterbacks. And if I don't have an actual first-round grade on any of the quarterbacks, I'm not going to take them in the top 5. In the top 10, if you're really desperate and you have a perfect system fit, I will give you some leniency. But at number 2 overall, you have to blow my socks off. And nobody has. So when analyzing other players that could be big impact players on this roster, I do see a couple. And that pertains to the wide receiver room with someone like T-Mac. You could end up arguing that he could be a massive win for your positional group after you trade away DeAndre Hopkins. I also think that offensive line is still an issue that you need to fix. I'd prefer to go after the best offensive lineman in the class, and that is going to be, when healthy, Josh Simmons, but because he's not healthy, it's Will Campbell. And it's going to irritate some people, absolutely. But when you analyze what this team needs the most, it's protection, it's quarterback play, and then, honestly, you can pretty much label every position in the offensive line outside of the left part of the offensive line of scrimmage. I would prefer to test out how Will Campbell can do on the right side. You look at the right tackles that are down the board. I'm going to be honest, I have very little faith in any of them. I have a lot of faith in Will Campbell, at the very minimum being a high-end offensive lineman. So go after Will Campbell. Let's draft a receiver in round 2 or a quarterback, whichever falls and is more valuable. Luckily for us, the quarterback class is deep in terms of developmental talent, and the wide receiver class is pretty damn deep in terms of overall talent. The offensive line class, not so much. Pick number 3 for the New England Patriots. Would have been my dream pick to go Will Campbell for him. I did just see Drake May just had a fantastic week, a 93 offensive grade. This was the one spot where I was really dreaming for Drake May to go to. It was this or actually Minnesota, to be fair. And I think that we all would agree that both those spots were the right landing spots for him. So you're in good hands right here. You have your quarterback of the future. Let's continue protecting him with someone that you can believe is a true left tackle. To be fair, you could wait and draft one, but Kelvin Banks is that guy who's getting a ton of love, and I think it's well-deserved as well. He had a little bit of a struggle week, technically, air quotes, struggle week versus Georgia, but at the same time, I think Kelvin Banks has been doing a phenomenal job this year and does earn the right to at least be considered in the top 5. Pick number 4 for the New York Jets. Again, there are no trades in this. I do think that they could be on the market for Will Johnson. DJ Reed's up for a contract this year. It's another team that should be looking for a successor at that quarterback position, but again, this is not the place to do it. Just my honest opinion. Defensive tiers with Mason Graham is certainly on the table, but I'm actually going to be going Will Johnson here. You're getting the best player in the class at a discount because he's had some knee issues. And you know what? Hopefully that's something that's short term, but Will Johnson to me is the best player. Last year, he was the best player I've ever seen. The 2023 Will Johnson was really up there with the best of the best at the cornerback position. Technically overall, but again, it's been a pretty small sample size. Pick number 5 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Would have loved to have drafted either of these offensive linemen. That's not the case. So we could look at corner. Will Johnson would have been nice. And since we have kind of eliminated all those options, this is going to be one of those weird picks where it's kind of a novelty item. I will say this, though. I think Christian Kirk is a very hot commodity. It's not out of the realm of possibility to be looking at a wide receiver at this point. Luther Burden, though, not the guy who I'd go after. It would be Isaiah Bond who I'd be considering at this spot. Now, can you consider any other player at this point? I think Ersery's starting to push himself into this consideration. He's been extremely consistent, and he can work both as a guard and a tackle. I think his long-term goal, though, is to be a pure tackle. He's only had 1 week where I honestly think that he's struggled, and that was versus Michigan. Every other week, he's been doing a fantastic job, and that's a big win for someone who's very athletic and was known as a primary run blocker early on. Now, Josh Simmons is an absolute stud. I mean, he literally ended up getting injured in the one game that he wasn't performing necessarily well in, but he was, to me, one of the best players in the class. I will say there are some rumors that if you do gut the organization, some guys are going to be up for sale, and that might open up a lot more positions to be able to address. I will say that, unfortunately, you're going to have to reach on this pick. This is a great spot to trade back, but I will be, air quotes, reaching here with Aireontae Ersery. Again, just mentioned him. He's been someone who's been on a very, very hot streak. Had one game where he had a little bit of a slip up and then bounced back. That's a big win for him. Michigan's been having a great year so far defensively with those edge rushers more as well as Stewart. So Ersery with that flexibility, again, would be a guy who I'd want to move back for, but I'm still pretty damn happy when you're sitting right there and you get him. At pick number 6 for the Saints, I think you got to add some extra offensive firepower here with someone like Tetairoa McMillan, who does bring that Mike Evans level presence to the squad that you guys have been dealing with for a very long time. At pick number 7 for the Las Vegas Raiders, it is quarterback that you need. This is where you can start justifying it. And I love Ashton Jeanty to the squad, but I also really do love the idea of allowing Cam Ward to just continue working on his processor in time. His turnover-worthy plays are very, very bad, but there's not many quarterbacks that have the high-level throws that Cam Ward has either. So we're going to go after Cam Ward at pick number 7. At pick number 8 for the Cleveland Browns, quarterback makes a lot of sense, but Jameis, if he continues to remain this hot, does not deserve to be replaced. He probably won't. Let's make that very clear. I don't think he will. But I also think that since Jameis and also Flacco last year had a lot of success in this offense, you don't necessarily need to force a high-value pick on the quarterback position. And so, especially in a quarterback class that doesn't really deserve to have that type of consideration, I do know a position that could be a massive benefit. Now, if we had a couple of the left tackles here, which technically you still do with the Josh Simmons, but he's coming off injury, I think one of the best ways to help this team out, Nick Chubb's up for a contract. Give yourself the continual identity of being an unstoppable run team. This is an AFC North type of player here. Ashton Jeanty literally had his worst week versus UNLV. And he still had over 100 yards. He still was able to just absolutely slice and dice. So, big fan of Ashton Jeanty. He's going in the top 10. You just got to find where. I was debating him for the Raiders right there, but I was like, the quarterback one's probably going to be going in that range. At pick number 9 for the Miami Dolphins, it's Mason Graham and nobody else. You need defensive interior pressure, and Mason Graham's going to bring it. At pick number 10 for the New York Giants, quarterback is certainly the guy who's on the market right now. I would say that, you still could be looking at right tackle because, even Evan Neal only played 1 rep. It's like Illuminor's been doing a serviceable job until TJ Watt decides to be TJ Watt. I know you guys are mentioning a boundary corner as well. I just highly doubt Ben Morrison comes out. So for this, we were going to consider him not coming out. Otherwise, I would say it wouldn't be a bad choice. Jedi Barron certainly in the consideration, but not for a top 10 pick. So for the Giants, I think it is pretty clear if the value is not there, A, trade down, but B, if you have to stick and pick. And if you're going to stick and pick, you got to look at all of your options. I think Drew Allar, if healthy, deserves consideration here in the first round. I don't think Quinn Ewers does. As much as I love Miller Moss, I still wouldn't take him in the first. He doesn't bring the potential upside that some of these other quarterbacks do. Carson Beck, absolutely not. Garrett Nussmeier is the guy who I'm considering here on top of Shedeur Sanders, Milroe, as well as Drew Allar. So, good range of quarterbacks. All of them have different skill sets. I think Garrett Nussmeier is a little too inconsistent to go in the first. I think he's a good developmental guy. And if the Giants pass on a quarterback in round 1 and somehow the top guys get taken, Nussmeier might actually be the perfect choice for you. Now, with Shedeur Sanders, the way he has used Travis Hunter, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for him to use Malik Neighbors in a similar fashion, where it is a ton of volume to a top-end target with actually really solid placement as well. Jalen Milroe, again, he's just been super inconsistent overall. As a passer, I mean, I know his running has been phenomenal, and to be fair, Dable is the type of guy who could potentially make that work. But Shedeur Sanders is that higher floor, and I think we're kind of tired of seeing, we're just kind of tired of seeing players not perform up to the quality of standard that you're looking for. I will actually elect to take Shedeur Sanders at number 10. Again, that's based on Milroe just being a little bit inconsistent still as a passer multiple years into his career. We're seeing with guys like Anthony Richardson who need to still work on their mechanics, work on their throwing, that being accurate is one of the most important things. And Milroe's ball placement is just not necessarily there. So I do think that with the current trend, because the NFL is a very trend-heavy league, we will be seeing a little bit more of a push towards quarterbacks that focus more on placement than necessarily accuracy. You talk about precision versus accuracy, right? Accuracy is is it catchable? Even with Milroe, to be fair, there's a lot of kickballs that are uncatchable, but, it's just right now, precision is what really matters, and guys like Shedeur Sanders, as well as Cam Ward, have a higher threshold for their precision than Milroe does. Pick number 11 for the Cincinnati Bengals. Edge rushers perfectly fine at this point. And there's a lot of edge rushers that could have went. You just talk about a top 10 that doesn't really have a lot of edge-needy teams. Nick Scorton is literally a dream pick for this team. You're getting yourself someone who's 285, who can kick to the interior as well, and just be an unrelenting presence. Nick Scorton coming off a red-hot week versus LSU with 7 pressures and 4 defensive stops. He finally started turning it on, and I'm super excited for him because I was a little bit underwhelmed. He kind of felt James Pearce, but in a much larger body in terms of great moves, but not applying them at the right time, at the right spot. And it looks like it's starting to finally click. That's a big win for Cincy and for Nick. Pick number 12 for the Los Angeles Rams. It's a good squad that you could go a multitude of places for. I've been pretty damn consistent on this. Again, we're having Ben Morrison return in this. I should have mentioned that earlier, but I'm going to be going Josh Simmons. He's somebody from San Jose State, I believe, who ended up just continually getting better year after year after year. And he was arguably the best player in the class. And now the Rams get to take advantage of him having a season-ending leg injury. That just sucks for Josh, sucks for us to not be able to evaluate him more, but realistically, he was one of the best players that, you've seen at the tackle position. He's up there with the Joe Alt, in my opinion. It's a very hot take, but Josh Simmons really did have those high-level reps that were just jaw-dropping. At pick number 13 for the Dallas Cowboys, running back would have been great if we had Ashton Jeanty here. We do not. Therefore, I do think wide receiver should be our next move, or defensive interior. And I actually really like the idea of going Kenneth Grant to the Cowboys. I know, another 340-plus pound defensive interior out of Michigan who's a freak athlete. It's scary. I get it. But Kenneth Grant and Mozzie Smith were not the same player to me. I think Kenneth Grant is just he had a slow start to the year, but he's someone who has unbelievable work ethic. He literally chased down, I think, Katron Allen from behind. There's a clip of that, and it is unbelievable. And that was from last year. Just an unrelenting athlete who has unbelievable pass rushing upside. And I know that the run defense is where you're going to try to focus, but I also want to emphasize the fact that at 45, we're going to be absolutely toast, most likely, on the defensive interiors. So this is where, because no trades, we can actually end up flexing a little bit to go after a player with an unbelievable uncapped ceiling. I picked number 14 for the Indianapolis Colts. Malaki Starks is the easy option for me here. Again, Ben Morrison going to be considered returning in this. We're going to go Malaki Starks to save us some time. Flexible defensive back, one of the best players in the game, like really, really quality player. You just can't really knock too much about him. Maybe he's a little bit underwhelming as a top-end athlete, but besides that, he's been freakish. Pick number 15 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Edge rusher is where I really want to focus for this team, but you can also look at tight end. You can also look at, I would say probably those are the two. You could look at receiver, though. I mean, technically, if you want to go Luther Burden, because Godwin's out again. And then you also look at Mike Evans. He has one more year left, but you could be looking for that longer term replacement. I don't think you need to focus on that. The offense has been doing relatively well even without them, but we all know it's much more fun to watch them with. But I do like the idea of going after edge rusher here. You got some fantastic players that I'm willing to take even at number 1 or 2 overall with Abdul Carter and James Pearce. Abdul Carter is going to be the red hot name. We're going to be having him go to the Buccaneers. At pick 16 for the Seahawks, been seeing a lot of Jalon Walker love to this team as a pure linebacker and edge rusher hybrid. Not going to go there. I will be looking at the offensive line still. I will be relentless when it comes to addressing the offensive line. I don't think Cam Williams actually ends up coming out in this draft because he's had some struggles, but this is the type of player that brings a ferocity that you will be looking for, and it's a weak right tackle class with Cam Williams being the bright spot in terms of development. He's so young, there's going to be slip-ups in his game, but it's good for him to experience it now and then see how he rebounds as the year goes on. Not a fan of how he performed versus Vandy, I will say. That was a really, really, really bad outing. 4 pressures versus Vanderbilt's not good. But I do have faith that he bounces back, and I think his foot speed needs to improve a little bit, but this is a team that I think can maximize his talents. They love ferocity, and even if he ends up having to be a guard in the short run, you're going to have yourself a quality tackle in the long. Pick 17, also the main reason I took him is because he is the selection I would take for the 49ers. That's not going to happen. So, with the 49ers, again, offensive tackle is where I was going to look. That is not the case right now. I will be taking a look at both edge rusher as well as offensive, or as well as corner. So again, Ben Morrison going to be considering returning in this. Shavon Revel is probably the next guy who would go besides Davison Igbinosun. But with that being said, I want to be able to focus on some edge rushing talent here. And Mykel Williams is perfect to have trained next to Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa had also that freakish build to him, and Mykel has just been someone who deserves a chance to show what he really has, and I think the Niners are a great place to let that be displayed. Pick number 18 for the Chicago Bears. As a team where you can go after Luther Burden to play that slot for the long run, but also the offensive line positions are still very, very lucrative. And, again, tons of talent. That's definitely a second round issue in the interior of the offensive line, in my opinion. So I wouldn't actually force it here. Jack Nelson's the next best player, in my opinion, even though, this past week ended up having a little bit of a struggle session. I think he allowed 2 pressures versus Penn State. But, I think that's a relatively adequate performance for someone going up against one of the best edge rushers in the country, one of the best players in the country there with Abdul Carter. But, I do think that we're going to opt out, and even with Darrell Taylor possibly returning, this is too damn good to not draft James Pearce. The offensive line, I think, has been depleted plenty at this point, and we're going after my number 2 player in the class. At pick number 19, we have the Arizona Cardinals, which would be my dream destination for James Pearce. However, that is not the case. I do still want to look at some edge rushing talent. I will say I do really like JT Tuimoloau, but at 51, I might be able to get Kyle Kennard or Kamen Rucker. I'm perfectly fine with that. So I think that defensive interior could also be the move here. Dion Walker's been picking up some speed. Derrick Harmon's very loved. Same thing with Tyleik Williams. It's a good group of defensive interior talent. Defensive line talent is carrying very heavily this year. But I will say, Luther Burden, I saw this in a mock draft, I think yesterday. It might have been Kyle Crabb's mock draft. I actually really like the idea because when you look at the composition of the receiving core, it used to be all these small after-the-catch guys, right? And now you have Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, and Marvin Harrison being kind of like that 3-headed monster. you don't really have a genuine after the catch threat that I think is deserving of being with those names. So I'm actually going to go Luther Burden here. I really do like what he can bring in terms of stretching the field, but also with the quick catch and the run after the catch ability. For number 20 in the Arizona Cardinals, the Los Angeles Chargers, jeepers. I do like the idea of going Isaiah Bond here. That's probably where I'm going to focus because I think that's the best player available in terms of talent besides Jalon Walker. Could have went Jalon Walker there for the Cardinals, but again, like, he's being so considered heavily as a linebacker. It's going to be very difficult to take him for a team that, will be looking with Kyler for how they can improve their future. But for the Chargers, I do like the idea of Isaiah Bond here. I don't think that I'm going to be overthinking it too much. Get some extra presence there with Ladd McConkey for the future. That's a ton of speed, and both of them are very good at route running as well. So I'd be very happy to see that. Pick number 21 for the Atlanta Falcons. Edge rusher, corner, even another receiver. But to be fair, I took the main guys. That's where I'd be focusing. And LT Overton's honestly a really solid option for this team because he is, even though 283 pounds, unbelievably flexible in his role. Like, he is somebody that can literally play any position, and he's just getting better and better. He's coming from Texas A&M, where they don't properly develop their edge rushers in the first place. This is someone I'm very stock up on in the NFL. You're already seeing him progress at a very high level from one system to another, but just imagine when he's going to be able to have even better coaching in the NFL, because, again, he's been held back there from Texas A&M. We're going to be going LT Overton here at 21. Pick number 22 for the Denver Broncos. Would have loved to have gone after one of the receivers at this point. That's not the case. Again, Ben Morrison considered out in this situation. So when evaluating the other options, I could certainly see tight end being one of the underrated positions to target. Greg Dulcich has been a pretty solid, reliable target there. Of course, you could end up waiting till like maybe round 3 and go after Terrence Ferguson, who already has a connection with Bo Nix. So you could kind of big brain it there if you would like. I do like the idea of going after edge here with player like Kyle Kennard, Kamen Rucker, Josiah Stewart. I will say one of the most entertaining players, and I know Sean Payton kind of has an eye for really solid linebackers, and especially ones even like Zach Bond who can play both as an edge rusher and a linebacker. Jalon Walker might be the pick at this point. It's a real big wild card pick. It's, again, a pick I would probably trade back from. Then again, you could also look at that left tackle spot, right? We talked about Jack Nelson. Garrett Bowles up for a contract. Don't think he's going to be returning anytime soon. So we could certainly see that Jack Nelson is the guy to go into the fold. He doesn't get enough respect. I don't know why he doesn't. Same thing with Holland Pierce. Both these guys are very solid tackles. But you know what? Let's roll the dice. Let's go Jack Nelson. There's picks that we never suspect in the first place. I think the Broncos are going to like 6'7", 315, and honestly, really damn consistent. Pick number 23 for the Ravens, edge rusher, offensive line. That's where I really want to put the focus. And the best position right now probably is that edge class. I really like JT Tuimoloau at this point. He's going to bring a lot of juice to the table that people don't give enough respect for. I do know that this team is looking for increased firepower. The fact that you just traded for Deontay Johnson, that is a big deal. But when looking at how you guys can address the positions the best, I still think offensive line's the way to go. I still do. And Tyler Booker's the boring pick, but he's just a really solid offensive guard. At pick 24 for the Eagles, it's down to 2 players. It's down to Jalon Walker as well as JT Tuimoloau. Tuimoloau would be a little bit more of that pure Josh Sweat role, but I don't think that we can sleep on Jalon Walker. Jalon Walker holds his own for 245. He's a ridiculously strong and dense human being, and I'm going to give him the love he deserves. At pick number 25 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, quarterback does seem like a proper route to look. You got Milroe, you got Alar, you got Nussmeier. I don't think Nuss is going to be in the right situation here. We haven't properly developed quarterbacks, if I'm going to be honest, but I do think that Alar and even Moss, I think Moss might be a better fit for the Steelers in like round 3. It might be a little bit better to try to target that then. I still think wide receiver is a position we need to focus on. Also, a boundary corner 2 that can be there for the long haul because Jackson is right now on a 1-year deal. Shavon Revel would not be a bad choice here. And honestly, I like the idea. I know it's kind of like FU to the Vikings right there, but it certainly is something that I do want to consider. Do I think the Steelers would go after a corner in round 1 over someone like Emeka Egbuka, who can be, I mean, Emeka, to be fair, is a slot. He is a slot, guys, whether you want to admit it or not. I'm actually going to go after Shavon Revel here. Yeah, let's do it. Shavon Revel, 6'3", 193. You're getting a lot of height in your corner core as well. It's going to be a big win. Pick 26 for the Minnesota Vikings. Corner still a position that you could still think about here. You could look at some interior offensive line talent for sure, but defensive interior wise, you can get someone who's extremely punchy with Dion Walker there, who still needs to develop, so you got some time with your veterans to be able to have some fun. Let's take a shot on it. Pick number 27 for the Buffalo Bills. This is where I'm going to focus heavily on edge rusher. And you got some really good ones. It's Shamar Stewart and JT Tuimoloau. Shamar Stewart, I think, is going to be a combine monster that is almost impossible to pass up for him. At pick number 28 for the Green Bay Packers, another team that I might be in the market for to go after JT Tuimoloau, or if Shamar Stewart were here, Shamar Stewart. I think that that's going to be your best application unless you want to go after Davison Igbinosun. To be fair, would not be a bad choice. But I do think this edge class heavily carries the rest of our draft, and these guys are all actually worth it comparatively to the other players in the class. Pick number 29 for the Washington Commanders, another team that could look heavily into that edge room. However, I think I'm going to be going after a corner here. We're going to go after Davison Igbinosun. We're going to use Jordan Hancock as the placeholder because you guys know what we do here. Well, we know what PFF doesn't do, which is actually have a full roster up there. Pick number 30 for the Houston Texans. Defensive interior makes a ton of sense. Let's go after the highest floor guy. Let's go after Tyleik Williams. Derrick Harmon's the punchy defensive interior for the pass rush. Tyleik Williams is more for that run stuffing ability, but I also think he'll be improved as a pass rusher in the NFL. At 31 for the Detroit Lions, we're going after edge one more time. And we're going after Princely Umanmellen, who is a little bit slow on his get-off, but has ridiculous talent that I think just needs to be a little bit more fine-tuned. At pick 32 for the Kansas City Chiefs, I will be going actually after Coulston Loveland here. I think he's a fantastic tight end and deserves a lot more love than maybe what he gets. And this team is used to using 2 tight ends for the long run. Coulston Loveland could be a big asset there. At pick 33 for the Chicago Bears, this is where we're going to look at offensive line. And I think Jonas Savania is perfect for this. He can be a center or a guard if need be. At pick number 34 for the Tennessee Titans, we went after an offensive lineman with Will Campbell in round 1. We still have some great options here in round number 2. And you can't really go wrong with any of them. You got Trey Harris, you got Jaden Higgins, but you also have Aireontae Ersery and Emeka Egbuka. Aireontae Ersery is like the most underrated prospect in this class because his whole entire team is absolute cheeks except for him. I do think he probably tries to return, but we're going to consider him coming out in this mock draft. I love Emeka Egbuka. I think there's a spot on this roster for him, and you're just getting your best player available. I could have went after Jalen Milroe there, to be fair, but again, I don't really think that you guys are necessarily built for a new quarterback, and this class has so many talents. Go after a Quinn Ewers round 3. Go after Jackson Dart. Go after Miller Moss. Like, there's going to be so many players, dude. Don't force a need. Don't force a need, because I don't think Jalen Milroe, based on the fact that Malik Willis didn't work here, it's just not, again, new system, to be fair. I'll give you some credit there. But it's just not a position that you guys are looking at overly heavily in terms of that style. So keep that in mind as well. For the Patriots, we already went after, what do we do in round number 1? I'm tripping. Kelvin Banks. We can get a possession receiver here. That'd be interesting, but I don't think that's necessarily a big issue. You just traded away Uche, and so I'm actually going to be going after Kyle Kennard here. Pick number 36 for the New York Jets. This is where you can take a shot on a QB. And above all these other QBs, I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to have that type of energy because the high-end throws he makes are very hard to replicate. Pick number 37 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is where we can take a corner. Yes, Ben Morrison is considered returning in this. And we already used David Igbinosun's card, but this is where we're going to use a player who is also in Florida. And no, it's not Fentrell Cypress. It's his teammate Azariah Thomas, my number 12 player in the class. Pick number 38 for the New Orleans Saints. Could end up actually looking at Jalen Milroe here. because you did end up benching Spencer Rattler in this most recent game. It's not off the table. You went after Tetairoa McMillan in round number 1. Oh, you could roll the dice. You could. I don't think I'd blame you for doing it, but at the same time, this team likes to run the ball too. Let's roll it. Let's see what happens. Let's go Jalen Milroe here. At pick number 39 for the Las Vegas Raiders, you talked about, you guys continue to you continue to tell me that running back's not a very heavily valued position by your GM. So I get it. That's fair. Besides that, I do think you could try to look for a right tackle upgrade. That's my personal opinion. I don't think it's the biggest issue, and I don't think this is the class to really do it. But I still want to throw the idea out there. I do know that you guys thrive on quality linebacker talent, and you could be going after one like Jack Kaiser, Jahad Campbell, or even Deontay Lawson. So there's a lot of routes that you can go, but one that I also think you should be focusing on is receiver. And I really like Aireontae Ersery for the reasons I mentioned earlier with the Titans pick. I think it's worth taking the shot on him. Pick number 40 for the Cleveland Browns. This is where we can take our shot on a QB. And this is where you can go after someone who's a little bit high floor. To be fair, there's not really many of them. Like, why not just wait for Carson Beck when you have a depleted receiving core? Well, Tillman's been doing a good job. I'll give Tillman his credit. But that left tackle spot could use some help. And there's only 2 left tackles left, in my opinion, that's even like worth thinking about. Anthony Belton's an absolute mauler. Like, he is super up and down. But the guy who I think could be a standout superstar is Josh Connerly. Josh Connerly has the high-end reps of the best tackles in the draft. Like, he probably has, if you take the best reps from all the players, it's Connerly and Simmons. So Connerly is definitely worth taking an extra peek at. That left tackle spot, to me, will definitely need to be heavily evaluated. Pick number 41 for the Dolphins went after Mason Graham in round 1. We're going to go after an offensive lineman here in round 2 with Wyatt Milam to play that guard role. He just has 32-inch arms, probably not going to be a tackle. Pick 42 for the New York Giants took a QB in round 1 with Shedeur Sanders. Here in round number 2, we're talking about those boundary corners. There's a lot of potential guys here. I will say I have my concerns with a lot of them. Jahdae Barron's probably the least, but he also has that slot flexibility that makes me a little bit nervous when the slot is, apart from this past game, kind of going to be the bread and butter for you guys. So looking at other positions, I do think another wide receiver is not off the table here. You got Jalen Royals, who's unbelievable after the catch, but also he's been getting better and better, but his career contested catch percentage isn't there around 60%. This dude's been absolutely crazy. He's been doing a fantastic job. I think that I want to give him some credit. Pick number 43 for the Cincinnati Bengals. We ended up going after Nick Scorton in round number 1. Let's go after some defensive interior talent. Let's just load up on the defensive interior. And I love the idea of going after Derrick Harmon here, someone who has, he's been doing better at the run stop rate. He was down in the 3 percentile range. He's been getting better at that. But he gets up there in that 20% pass rush win rate games, and that's impossible to stop. 1 out of every 5 reps, this dude's in the quarterback's face. That's ridiculous. Pick number 44 for the Carolina Panthers. We already drafted Travis Hunter in the first round because we replaced Deontay Johnson. Here in round number 2, we're going after an edge rusher, and I like Kamen Rucker or Josiah Stewart. We're going to go and stay in Carolina with Kamen Rucker, who's been doing a fantastic job coming off a red-hot week. Pick number 45 for the Dallas Cowboys. We are going to be going potentially after a running back here with Quinshon Judkins. He's coming off 2 pretty poor weeks, having about sub-3 yards per carry on those 2 weeks combined. Just not a huge fan of that. However, I also understand that this team, he's been having some struggles in terms of health because he had some hand injuries. So I do think that going after a big possession receiver like Jaden Higgins or Trey Harris, Ty Felton, Ricky White, these players are not off the table. They're all groundbreaking level players. The question is, which style do you want? Do you want the big possession receiver who's still really solid at running routes? Do you want someone who's just overall a very dynamic receiver? When there's a mismatch, he's going to make you pay. Do you want someone who's like nifty and extremely fluid as an athlete and can rack up big yardage games? Or do you want someone who's an all every down contributor who is just unbelievably dynamic? And I actually love Ricky White the most. So let's go after Ricky White here over Quinshon Judkins. Again, he's been having a lot of struggles. this year over the past 2 weeks. So I'm going to wait for him to bounce back. Pick number 46 for the Indianapolis Colts. A lot of you guys have been telling me about the linebacker issues. I think that that's perfectly valid. That being said, the only guy who I'd really respect here is Deontay Lawson. He's been having some very high-level games versus some high-level teams, and he's a great athlete. He's built very well. So after we ended up going after Malaki Starks in the first, I could end up considering Jahdae Barron here, but again, the slot is where we're already kind of comfortable. I don't see very much in terms of the flexibility that you can have for Jahdae Barron in case he has some early struggles. Then we have the Buccaneers. Ended up going after an edge in round number 1 with Abdul Carter. We're going to make this pick very simple and easy. Tyler Warren, a tight end out of Penn State. Fantastic player. Could be a first-round pick, but ended up slipping in this one. Pick number 48 for the Seahawks, another team that will be looking heavily into that linebacking room. I will say that Derrick Harmon probably going to be the next guy on my list. I do think that he is a very talented linebacker that gets a pretty bad rap. He ended up having some poor coverage this past week, but I will say that, you do have also Tyrese Knight in there. There's certainly a reason why you'd probably want to steer away. Harold Perkins is considered as returning in this, by the way. So if we were to evaluate other positions, we drafted a right tackle. I think wide receiver, you're set. Quarterback, you could try to develop one of these guys like Drew Allar at this point, not out of the question. Tight end wise, I think you're fine. Running back, I think you're fine. Tackle, we already addressed it. Guard, I think that you guys are pretty much fine for the long run, especially if you end up having Cam play there in the short. You could look for a second boundary corner. I know Nehemiah Pritchett's had some reps there, but this is also, again, a class where you don't really want to do that. I will say safety is a position where you should start looking. And Nick Scorton is someone who still ended up garnering a top 20 grade for me. He's 6'3", 227. It fits with the defensive mindset that your team has. Pick 49, the Niners ended up drafting edge in round number 1. What did we end up taking for you guys? Mykel Williams. We're going to go after an offensive tackle here. And I'm going to go after the one that is extremely flexible, extremely dynamic, and needs to be a little bit more refined as a run blocker, but that's because the system he's in doesn't allow it. Excuse me, it's Armand Membou here. I think this dude's fantastic. I mean, he gives a lot of these edge rushers their worst graded games, so that's something that you really need to note. And Armand Membou, well deserving of this grade. He's been a top 50 player for me for a hot minute now. Like, where's he at? Where's Armand? Am I about to eat my words? No, he's number 39, so he's even a top 40 player currently. So pick number 50 for the Chicago Bears. Defensive interior, we already took. Interior offensive line. I honestly don't think it's a bad idea to go after TJ Sanders here. Look at that explosiveness. We ended up going, I guess, in the early third for this one with the South Carolina defensive interior before. In Pickens, I think we're going to do it right this time with TJ Sanders. Pick number 51 for the Arizona Cardinals. By the way, completely revamped both lines right there, which is great. Cardinals, we ended up going, what did we do? Luther Burden. We're going to look at those edge rushers right now. And Josiah Stewart, I mean, look at that. Statistically, this year has been phenomenal. He's just a little bit weirdly sized at 6'1", 245, and that might cause people to have a little bit of a pause, but you end up getting yourself a big difference maker on defense and on offense. Pick number 52 for the Chargers. We're going to look at that tight end room, double checking what we did with the Chargers. We went Isaiah Bond, and we're going to go Harold Fannin Jr. here. He's been ridiculously productive this year. One of the best players in the draft. Pick number 53 for the Falcons went after LT Overton in round number 1. Here in round number 2, it's going to be corner or it's going to be wide receiver. I think this is the perfect spot for Jahdae Barron, who's had a fantastic year. Flexible for slot as well as boundary. I think that's going to be really good there with Clark Phillips as well as AJ Terrell. Pick number 54 for the Broncos. This is where we're going to get our guy who could be good after the catch. Torrey Horton's out for the year, not worth the pick. I will say Trey Harris actually might be the best at this. This is such a hot take. I think Sam Brown's one of the most underrated players in the entire country. This dude is just ridiculously talented, especially after the catch. Round 3, go after him. So we'll drop that. We'll say like big brain at round 3. We ended up going after a left tackle in round number 1. We're going to look at an edge here in round number 2. And honestly, I think Jack Sawyer fits the edge profile that you guys look for. Gritty, nasty, heavy, run defense, and also some pass rushing upside there. Pick 50 off 55, jeepers, for the Baltimore Ravens. Ended up going after offensive line in round 1. Let's get some edge rushing talent here in round 2 with Zonovan Iziruwaku. This dude's been fantastic this year overall. Every single game he seems to take over. I mean, apparently apart from the last one, this guy's just been really, really rock solid. For Philly at number 56, you could be looking at another tight end here. You do have guys like Gunnar Helm who've been doing a fantastic job. Like, they're very similar to Jared Wiley, but it's a little bit early for those guys. I will say that, you already drafted your small edge. You could be looking for someone like Landon Jackson to be a bigger edge. It's not out of the realm of possibility. You drafted 2 corners. You could also draft 2 different styles of edge rusher. That being said, it's a team that doesn't need too much. I actually would be looking primarily at linebacker. Now, I think Jihad Campbell could certainly be in the mix. He's had some pretty poor games, but his high-level play is certainly noticeable to a majority of the NFL scouting community. Will take the shot on him. Pick number 57 for the Steelers. We drafted a wide receiver, a corner in round number 1 with Shavon Revel. Here in round number 2, we're going to roll the dice on a QB. We're going Drew Allar. You guys know my love for Drew Allar to the Steelers, but also, I just don't think he should be falling out of the top 60. Potentially has some knee concerns from this past week, but I don't think it's going to be a big issue. He's just still developing. He's 20 years old. Pick number 58 for the Bills. They got back-to-back. Ended up drafting Shamar Stewart in the first. Shamar Turner's his teammate. We're going to go after wide receiver and defensive back here. You got Kyron Lacy, who's a baller, but I do think a third wide receiver that can complement Amari Cooper as well as Keon Coleman, going to be your best return on investment. And that's Ty Felton right here. It's Ty Felton or Kyron Lacy. You can't really go wrong with either of them. They're both doing really, really good job overall. I'm going to go after Ty Felton here, though. Pick number 59, told you we're going to go defensive back here. I think that's pretty simple. You can go after Sebastian Castro. If you keep him near the line of scrimmage, especially in the slot role, I think this guy is one of the best players in the entire country. He's my best pure graded slot in the draft, but I do think that he can even play some sub linebacker at 210. He's just a weird, freakish build, and I want to see Buffalo use him all around. Pick number 60 for the Green Bay Packers. We ended up going, my memory's failing me, JT Tuimoloau in the first round. I think here we could focus more on that corner position. You got Takeo Davis, who's extremely flexible. Well worth the selection there. At pick 61 for the Commanders, we ended up going, again, brain failing me at the moment, I think Davison Igbinosun, which we did. Jordan Hancock was a placeholder. We're going to look at the edge rushing group, and we're going to go after Landon Jackson in here in round number 2. Number 62 with the Texans. Went defensive interior. At this point, I think going after a backup running back in Quinshon Judkins is pretty damn good value. Leaving the Lions at number 63 to go after the highest floor interior offensive lineman, which is Tate Ratledge. And ending off the draft, you get the Chiefs sitting here at 64. Drafted a tight end in round number 1. And here in round number 2, I would like to go after defensive interior, and Walter Nolen is here. Now, because I was absolutely stupid, we are actually going to be making a little bit of a change here. We're not drafting Walter Nolen to the Chiefs. In fact, we are putting Walter Nolen to the Bengals. The Bengals are giving Derrick Harmon to the Bears, and the Bears are giving the Chiefs TJ Sanders. Unbelievable. Yeah, my brain absolutely went full dumbass on that one. But again, Walter Nolen, not the pick for the Chiefs. It's TJ Sanders, and we're cycling Walter Nolen all the way up to Derrick Harmon. Technically, if you really are that butthurt about it, you could swap Tyleik Williams and then actually push all of them down. But again, feel free to do that on your own time. I love you guys. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the far side.